Hey, in this video, we're talking about leaning out your legs for the naturally more muscular lady. So if you're somebody that feels like you have bulky or thick legs, this video is for you. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Melanie from Female Fitness Systems, and I'm one of those ladies too. I have struggled with my legs since I was a teenager. I've always felt like they're more bulky or thick than all of my friends growing up. And into my 20s and 30s, it was something I struggled with. So today I'm going to share my story of how I leaned out my legs and then give you some tips for what you can do yourself. And I wanted to do this video because I know that there's a lot of advice out there on the internet from people who don't have your body type. So I think that it's really important to hear from somebody who has the same experience and same body type as yourself. And if you want some help with your training, I'll link to my programs, my online training programs in the description of this video, and you can check them out after watching. These days, all of my programs are designed to lean out the legs because it's something that pretty much every woman wants, and it's something that I get asked about almost on a daily basis. So let's get into my story and then we'll start talking through those tips for leaning out your legs. A little background about myself. I started training with a trainer in my 30s, and that's where I learned to do proper weight training, but I didn't understand how to build a really feminine shape. And so I trained with him for a couple of years, and he was an awesome trainer, but it was a bodybuilder style of program and training that we did. And the problem with that is that he had me training my legs very heavy. So very heavy squats, leg presses, leg extensions, those sorts of things. And over the couple of years that I trained with him, I actually ended up with really big legs. And they weren't shapely, they were just thick. And I'm gonna put some photos on screen here. Now back then I didn't have a good camera and I didn't take very good photos, so they're a bit blurry, but they'll give you an idea of what had happened. So my legs by the end of the 2 years were really thick, and I had a little revelation one day where I thought, this is actually not the shape that I wanted. When I first started training, I actually wanted to develop my glutes, but I would have never have wanted really thick legs. And so I actually quit training with my trainer, and then I spent the next year learning about training, and I taught myself to lean out my legs. And this was actually the whole inspiration for creating Female Fitness Systems, is that I just realized that there wasn't a lot of good information out there for us ladies in terms of how to create a really feminine shape. The bodybuilder world just tells you just squat and you'll be fine, you won't get bulky legs. And there just wasn't a lot of advice that rang true for me as a mesomorph lady wanting to build a more feminine shape. And so over the year that I decided to lean out my legs, I really changed the way I trained. And by the end of the year, my legs looked significantly different. So during that year, I pretty much quit every heavy lift for my legs, and I did almost all body weight training. I did a lot of circuit style stuff, and I did some band work. I still kept the heavy glute bridges and some backside work because I wanted to keep my glutes nice and shapely, but I ended up with a much different shape to my legs. Now, one thing you should know in those photos is that I was maybe about 1 kilo or 1.5 kilos lighter in some of the photos, but overall, I would say that the weight loss was not the main reason my legs got shapelier. It was because of the way that I had started training or not training. So that's my background and that's my experience with bulky legs. These days I kind of sit in the middle of those photos. I don't mind having a bit more muscle in my legs. I'm always really trying to develop my glutes, but I'm not so fussed about how big they are. I think I like where they are these days, and there's no point in fighting against my genetics. But if you want to lean out your legs, what should you do? Well, let's get into those tips now. The first thing you should probably do is, like I did, is quit heavy lifting, at least for a while. Quit heavy squats, heavy lunges. Don't do the leg extension, because when we're talking about bulky legs, it's usually the quads that we're talking about. So basically quit heavy training for your quads at all. And I know that runs counter to a lot of what you're gonna see on the internet, but remember, this is advice coming from somebody that's done it with your body type, and I can only tell you what I did and what works for me, but also what has worked for a lot of my clients is just quit heavy lifting, especially if you've got to lose some muscle, because the only way you're going to lose muscle is by not training. I can't forget as well, though, to also mention the sports you do. So it's not just about the weights that you lift, in my experience with mesomorph ladies. Sometimes just doing things like spin classes or step classes or the Stairmaster, those sorts of things can be too much for ladies like us. I've found personally that the stimulation that I get from these sorts of activities is enough to build up my legs and to make them feel thicker. And so you just have to trust yourself. I get asked this a lot, should I quit doing spin class? I would say quite likely if you're trying to lean out your legs, you should quit doing your spin class, or in the very least, you should really back off the tension and not do the real heavy mountain climbs, because you just have to look at a cyclist and see the muscles in their quads to know that this is what's going to happen with your legs if you're doing these kind of sports, especially if you're somebody who puts on muscle more easily. And so my advice would be, if you want to know what cardio to do, I would say just walking, just gentle walking, or anything that doesn't really stimulate your legs. So if you are going to be biking, just don't do a lot of real hard biking. Try to keep it really easy and don't get too much stimulation on your quads. The next thing I would say about leaning out your legs, though, is that you have to think about your overall shape. And so we don't just want your legs to just go skinny. You want to make sure that you keep your glutes nice and perky, and you want to make sure that you're still targeting cellulite. And the way that you do that is you make your leg workouts more focused on the back side of your body. So you want to focus on your glutes and your hamstrings. And the way that you do that is you use a lot of bands, because they're not going to give you that same stimulation as the heavy weights, and you can use some cables. And then I would say that you should probably throw in a few heavy exercises for your glutes. For example, doing some heavy hip thrusts and glute bridges at least once a week. So my regime personally, I make sure I do those heavy hip thrusts and glute bridges at least once a week. I find that really helps to keep not only my glutes in shape, but I feel like it helps keep my lower back strong. I make sure I do some really heavy kickbacks at least once, often twice a week. And then I do a lot of band work. The thing about band work is that it's really important that you also have a really good muscle connection, so don't just go through the motions. But if you can really learn to build up a burn and connect with your muscles and to even hit failure with the bands, you can get a lot out of your band training. And so these days I do a lot of band work. I might have one heavy dedicated leg day, and then throughout the week, I usually just kind of scatter my leg training in with my upper body workouts and hit my glutes multiple times a week with bands and all sorts of stuff like kickbacks on the cable and just lighter sort of movements. If I do any lunges at all, they're pretty much all body weight. And these days I do some kind of medium squats, but I don't do anything heavy still for my quads. The other thing I wanted to mention is that in my experience for mesomorph ladies, sometimes a little less training overall works really well. And so I think that mesomorph ladies can usually get away with less leg training. And I've heard this from my clients as well, as a sort of like the less they do, the better their legs feel. So just bear that in mind and trust yourself that you know what makes your legs feel good. Try to find the right balance for yourself. And quite likely, if you're a mesomorph lady watching this, the balance is going to lie in making sure you do enough to not get cellulite and to target your glutes, but not doing too much so that you're stimulating your quads and they're growing, if that makes sense. There's going to be a balance in there for you somewhere. The final thing I wanted to talk about is your overall weight. Now, sometimes ladies come to me and they say that they've seen on the internet that there's gurus out there saying, oh, you can't get bulky, you just need to lose weight. There's a little bit of truth in that, but just a little bit. Overall, I think that mesomorph ladies feel better when they sit on the leaner side of what they normally weigh. So normally I find that my ladies have a weight range that they sit within. For example, for myself, I sort of sit between about 62.5 and 61 kilos. 61 is my leaner side. The closer I am to that leaner side, the better my legs feel. And so whenever somebody is working with me and they're trying to lean out their legs, I usually also recommend really tightening up their calories and trying to drop just a little bit weight if they want their legs to feel better. Because in my experience, usually you can do all of the training and that will help because you can take some muscle off, which is overall going to help with your legs feeling bulky. But you're going to feel better if you sit on that leaner side as well. So that's where the truth sort of comes in with these internet gurus. But you still can get bulky if it's your body type. Even if you are on that leaner side, you might feel like your legs are just too bulky for you. And unfortunately, that comes down to a bit of genetics. And my advice would be, yes, you probably do want to lose a little bit of weight if you want your legs to feel better. So that's my third overall tip for you is tighten up your calories, take off a little bit of extra weight, and I'm sure your legs are going to feel better overall. So hopefully you found this helpful. To summarize, back off the heavy training. Less is often more when it comes to mesomorphs. Hit your backside though. Make sure you still are hitting your glutes and your hamstrings by doing things like your kickbacks. You can do RDLs. You can do a lot of band work, and that band work will be effective, especially if you understand getting a good muscle connection. And then the final thing I would say is to likely try to lose just a little bit of weight so your legs feel better. That's it from me today. Make sure you check out my online programs if you want some help with your training, and don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you want to catch more videos like this from me. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon.